Paul is a technology and consumer science expert with over 25 years of restaurant and business experience, working with the top brands in the world. Selected by his peers as the most influential in food service media, Paul is also an author, producer, and director of several industry series and documentaries. After months and months of trying to stay above water in what has been called a COVID riptide, the waters are still uncertain. When will consumers return to restaurants? Has their behavior shifted? Has their confidence changed? Here to help us navigate these new waters is Paul, with a deep dive into the consumer science behind the COVID crisis. So without further ado, let's jump into consumer trends and U.S. data on COVID expected recovery with Paul Barron.
All right, so thanks for that great intro. And moving on to our topic and discussion point for this session, I'm really going to kind of go in and break down some of the latest trends that are developing for the recovery. And part of this is consumer trends, but also some brand trends I think that will make a lot of sense to you guys. Consumer trends and U.S. data driving the recovery. The concept here behind Recover America, again, is to really kind of deliver a group of sessions. We're going to do them about every 3 to 4 weeks. And in these sessions, you'll get everything from operators to experts, all covering the topics of how to basically build your business back from what has been one of the most difficult times for the restaurant industry in the history of the restaurant industry. Let's just break down into a little bit about the Recover America sessions. As you guys know, you're attending here on November 24th. The next session we have is on December 15th, and then coming up in January on January 5th. And those will continue to drive into a lot of really deep dive information that will get into really kind of helping you guys run your business in a much better way. So let's break down some of the key trends and consumer data that is really driving what's happening in the marketplace today. And I think without saying too much, everybody knows it's takeout and delivery trends. This has been pretty much the driving force for the restaurant industry, and in some cases, the saving grace of the restaurant industry in many ways. When you look at some of the things that are happening, what you see on screen right there is a book by James Clear. I've mentioned this book before, and it's a very interesting one if you have not had a chance to read it. It talks about how habits are developed. And in the early days of COVID, we referenced this book and kind of what was happening with consumers. This is definitely taking place now, and we're going to now show you some data, historical data, all the way back to February that will be able to really kind of drive it home in terms of how it takes from 18 days to 254 days for a person to develop a full onset habit change. Part of the things that do occur for habitual change is kind of where and what is driving the changes themselves. And these are some of the things that are kind of changing the mindset of today's consumer. And one, of course, is remote work. Everybody knows that we've seen so much in the way of remote and virtual work now from a large sector of the population, especially in the urbanized areas of the United States. The other thing is virtual gatherings. Obviously, you're attending one right now. This is also having a major effect because there's hardly any face-to-face meetings anymore. And this is driving a very big difference in our work process. There's two things that really affect our habits. One is our play, what we do in our off time, and the other is our work. And this is definitely a component that is driving some very big habitual changes in how we're addressing eating out and how we're going to do it maybe for many years to come. The other thing you're going to see is obviously the takeout and delivery model has shifted. Cashless and e-commerce has really changed in terms of people utilizing cashless and e-commerce a lot more. And then, of course, we get into health and safety, deurbanization. What I mean by deurbanization is people moving out of large cities and breaking away into places where maybe they can continue to raise their family, or maybe since they're working virtually, they don't have to go into these major cities and pay high rents and all those kind of things. So that's a big deal. All of this is being driven by technology and the concept of how technology has been advanced over the last year. When you look at what's happened, I've been studying and tracking technology for 25 plus years. I've never seen this much movement in one space, especially in a vertical like the restaurant industry, in the history of at least my career, all the way back to Microsoft in the early 90s. This just has not ever moved at such a speed. Now, part of that is technology development, but most of it is the kind of the scenario of what's happening, obviously, here worldwide. All right, so what I'm showing you here right now is a data set of consumer habits on takeout and delivery and what are their key concerns. And this is kind of interesting because it goes back into June, July, August, and September that are basing the data from safety from pickup point, preferring curbside, and then they want contactless. And these are kind of the things that really break into this. And if you look at kind of the growth here in June, safety was a big factor. Curbside was just beginning. And of course, contactless was now starting to become a realization. This evolved into July. Safety continued. Curbside grew a little bit. And also contactless jumped up to 63%. Then we get into August, and safety stabilizes right here, which is interesting because it does hold on through September. But you see a big jump in curbside preferential from consumers. 68% now are participating in curbside pickup. This is almost double that of what was happening back in June. And then now you jump to September. We are now at 79%. That's the big lift that I wanted to kind of show you here, where safety kind of plateaued and has held as still the number one concern. But curbside is now a huge factor in being able to sell products in terms of food service products online, whether you're doing an e-commerce model or someone's calling you or any kind of function like that. But the delivery method being curbside, one of the fastest growing, and then of course contactless is holding on as well in terms of growth. And I think a lot of people were already kind of accustomed to that. Curbside, though, they were not. Let's also move into the transaction analysis here. And this is something that I think most everybody kind of knew, but this really kind of shows that this may be a long-term effect on how transactions are going to happen in our restaurants. So most of you guys know it's day parts throughout the day. We know what's coming in through online or to go, and then how many transactions are coming for dine-in. If you look at the swap here, takeout and dine-in is green, takeout is blue. The takeout is blue, and it's moving from January, which was a fairly light. This is on average on about 87,000 restaurants in Foodable Labs data set that we worked on transactions with. This moves up to 41 transactions on takeout in March. So they were still reeling, but that was the only way we were actually selling any food was through pickup and delivery. A lot of companies just weren't ready for it yet. And then by May, we were at full tilt at 82 transactions, and our dine-in, of course, swapped all the way down to 38. And that was after lockdown. And then we move into July, but we continue to see the fall off here on dine-in. Even though many states are not locked down, there are a few that are coming back into lockdown. Dine-in continues to fall off here. This is a big concern when you look at the restaurant industry overall, because this changes the unit economics, it changes your labor model. There's so many things that could be happening here. The question is really going to be watching this trend if it continues to dip. If we end up at around 25% on dine-in as kind of a holding pattern through Q1, this could really make a shift and a hit on the restaurant industry as a whole, especially in full service dining. I want to move on to the breakdown of third party and native delivery. And this is another transaction component that's very interesting here. There are some variations here, but this essentially is the demographic on 18 to 34. We're looking at third party, January through February, third party, 18 to 34, about 4 transactions per month. They jumped to 5 transactions per month in March and June. In July, third party, they drop to 4 transactions again in that sector. And then you move to direct takeout. That's the difference I want to show here and kind of represent, is you went from 2 direct takeout, meaning I'm going to pick up the food, to 3, and now to over 4 transactions a month on average now that we're looking at the July through October data, and this is on the 18 to 34 crowd. Let's jump up to our next demographic, which is the 35 to 54. This is a little bit more pronounced. You had 3, 4, and 3 on average in the third-party delivery from January all the way into July and October, and then you jump from, in the same time periods, from 3 to doubling that and holding strong, a little higher than 6, almost 7 transactions per month in terms of the 35 to 54. So what's showing, and what I mean by showing these slides, is that there is a shift to direct party takeout, meaning it's kind of the old school model of call the order in or order online or order on your app and you go get the food. There is a big concern with safety on third party. There's also a concern of the cost ramifications that third party is implementing and the whole issue of quality of the product, because you kind of control it a little bit more if you're going to pick it up. Hopefully you're catching it at a fresher state. So there's a lot of factors that really go into this and move into causing this third-party shift. The question will be, of course, will we see third-party continue to plateau, especially in the younger crowd? The 18 to 34 is the one I'm very interested in watching because that one could be a leading indicator for a long-term impact on third-party delivery. And this does affect the restaurant industry in a big way because most operators today are depending on third-party delivery as kind of their golden goose. It's the one marketplace that they have to be able to expose their products and their brands. Okay, so I want to break here and kind of move into the next category. I'm not going to dive in tremendously deep here because we are going to be doing a session specifically on ghost kitchens and virtual brands. But this next slide really kind of just breaks down I want to kind of break down a little bit about where the new normal is going and kind of what the new landscape of the industry is going to be. When you look at the restaurant industry and what we've been through in the last 8-9 months, there is a very evident shift that is occurring, and it's one that unfortunately we may not be able to unwrap or unwind as we have to make changes in our operations, but also if we're planning on growing business and growing unit count, it means we've got a complete prototype shift that is coming or is being developed and most likely will be launched in early 2021 for what could be dozens and dozens of brands that are looking to open up new units. And I think a lot of people are really looking at third party as kind of the big game here. Uber's biggest business is officially no longer ride sharing. So this was a big factor that came in to the industry just this past few months, where Uber essentially has moved into a situation where they are continuously hitting more and more delivery as their primary revenue program. All right, so let's talk about what else is driving this, and this is for ghost kitchens and virtual brands. If you're following the real estate space or the real estate market, you also are seeing a massive move into non-traditional flex space. And what I mean by that is most people see this as, I won't call them warehouses, but they are in most cases in B and C locations, usually near the bedroom communities, but definitely a different kind of facility, usually a larger facility, has more room. It has the ability maybe to run virtual kitchens or virtual brands out of them, but it is not a retail space. And this is a big track right now. We started tracking this area of real estate and it's getting harder and harder to find, which means the inventory is very scarce. And the inventory, as I've talked to real estate agents around, at least here in South Florida and also in Texas, is that they're all saying the same thing, that we're seeing a lot of movement, not only from logistics and fulfillment companies, but also the restaurant industry who are looking to go in this direction. So this is going to be a challenge as we start to move into next year, where real estate is really going to come from. We may actually end up having to use B and even A restaurant locations as our ghost kitchens, even though we don't have the retail traffic to be able to support the retail square footage price, which is a huge deal for being able to move to the next level when you look at building out a ghost kitchen or a virtual brand on a long-term basis. This next slide really kind of breaks down the growth potential. And this is based off of what we're seeing just here in 2019 and 2020, because ghost kitchens and virtual brands were already in development. It wasn't as though they were brand new before COVID hit. It just was a very slow ramp up. As you can see, we had about 31 concepts that had some sort of ghost kitchen or virtual brand out of over 800 plus fast casual concepts. And now we look at this in 2020, we're going to be seeing 63 different concepts so far. That could still end up being closer to 70 or 80 concepts by the end of the year that reveal their ghost kitchen or virtual brand plans. We expect that to, in 2021, to go to 162, hit 203 by 22, and by 2025, we could see almost 900 concepts building out in a format of ghost kitchen and virtual brands, providing that we continue to see this move in all these contributing factors. And some of those are new online markets, which are going to be marketplaces that kind of develop delivery logistics, which is really going to start to change the game around software as a service, which could come from other places other than your typical third-party companies. Integrated content, meaning people are going to be able to start utilizing integrated content to actually get their brand awareness. And I'll show you some data here in a second that's very interesting about how ghost kitchens are performing against traditional brands. More real estate options for ghost kitchens. They're going to be able to go in new places, in new kinds of concepts, and then multifunction lifestyle menus. And of course, you get into second and third tier and tertiary markets. Those are all big pluses for developing virtual brands and ghost kitchens, because you're now going to be able to take product out to parts of the country that maybe did not have it. In some cases, food deserts, people that either didn't have fast casual or didn't have a lot of brand options. And now with the advent of ghost kitchens, virtual brands, and third-party and first-party delivery, we'll see a complete new landscape developing over the next few years. Now, the more I talk to operators, the more evident it is that these CEOs that at least I talk to, and there's probably about 100 that I communicate with quite often, they're all pretty much in the same camp, and that is that we are not going to see a shift, a major shift, even through 2021, which means by 2022, there has to be a business model shift as we move to the next level. Is if it becomes a hybrid, but I think by then consumer acceptance of how we're eating out and shifting to experiential food is going to be so ingrained in our society, much like QSR did in the early 60s and developed into a point to where it never turned back. And if you knew or follow the history of quick serve and fast food, you'll understand what I'm talking about, because the evolution of fast food was not necessarily drive-through until the early 70s, and it stuck so solidly in the fabric of our society that it is still the number one method in which QSR and fast food runs their business today, 30 years later. So this is or 50 years later, this is a big deal. So as we move into the development over 2021, this could be the sticking year that completely reformats the restaurant industry. So let's talk about some consumer acceptance of ghost kitchens. This is the thing that it surprised me, but also didn't surprise me. If you look at these numbers, 62% of customers on a marketplace, meaning like an Uber Eats, they were willing to try an unknown brand. That's pretty high, but I think the scenario here is that consumers now are trying to reach out and just do one, they just don't have the options, and they're also just downright bored. So they're opening up into a lot of new options and being able to go in this direction. 73.2% of customers returned to those same brands. So once they experienced a ghost or a virtual brand, they went back. So it wasn't as if that they tried it once and they were one and done. They are developing a relationship with these brands very quickly, and they're willing to do it on a more regular basis. Here was the one that kind of scared me. Well, didn't really scare me, but you look at it, 69, almost 70% of customers went direct after only 2.3 transactions. So what I mean by that is that after almost 2.5 transactions on Uber Eats, if I liked that brand, I started calling them and doing direct delivery or direct pickup. That is a huge shift away from. We're compiling some more data, and I'll present more of this kind of detail in an upcoming event here on Recover America on specific ghost kitchen data analysis and how this is going to potentially play out in the coming years. But the last bullet point here is the one that I think all brand leaders need to take very, very serious consideration to, and that is 51.2% of customers selected ghost brands over a known brand. So ghost brands, when you are living in the virtual world, your ghost brand can look just as sexy and just as beautiful because you no longer have the operational aspect showing off these beautiful retail locations that win you business in most cases. It is a much more level playing field, and I think a lot of people have wondered whether or not ghost kitchens can actually make it through and be a successful model without the advent of retail locations to spread the brand word. The brand word now, my friends, is going to be on digital, and it's most likely going to be on mobile, and the type of interactions that most consumers under the age of 54 are really spending a lot of time doing to get their food. All right, let's move into the trends to watch for 2021. And I want to kind of go through this. I've presented a couple of these before, but essentially you kind of know this already. The first trend is kind of this massive effect on urban real estate and fast casual operations. This is also going to affect full service and even casual dining, anything that is really living off of the urban centralized markets, and that's because our workforces are not necessarily going back. When you look at the kind of numbers here that are being presented by companies that are employing 50 to 100 people, or 150, 151 to almost 500, or 500 people, 500 to 1,000, and over 1,000. Look at the work from home expansion. That's the gold bar you're seeing right there on screen. 62% said we're going to continue our work from home expansion. 72% as you get a little bit larger. The 500 to 1,000 was interesting. It was a little bit lower, but the 1,000 plus employee companies, 72% are considering work from home as a permanent business model, which completely changes the dynamic for how restaurant brands pick units in urbanized areas. This is going to have long-lasting effect on the restaurant industry. Further, what you're going to continue to see is what you see right here is kind of just some references from Samantha Gillison, which is kind of just talking about, is the coronavirus the end for fancy restaurants or full service? You know, I had a chance to, and Tom, you can see Tom Colicchio's quote there. He's saying, listen, we've got to rework and rethink our entire model. David Chang has already started to really get, I almost fear, a little bit dark even for David, and I've had a chance to talk to him before, and he's always very up, but I fear that some of these chefs and operators are they're struggling so much, they're trying to figure out how the model is going to work, and there's going to have to be a lot of shift. I had Andrew Zimmern on my show, The Barron Report, not too long ago. He made a statement that I thought was very, at least to me, it was still surprising, and basically what he was talking about was the CARES Act. And also, if the restaurant industry did not get a bailout, if it does not, he basically said we're looking at an extinction level event. This could be a big deal to really watch closely in the first quarter of 2021. Next up, you're going to see some interesting things, and that is AI is going to start to invade customer service. That space is going to become very, very important. And I think you're going to really need to keep a high touch point with this because this could flow into your operations. Additionally, logistics companies are going to start to appear for you, and that is going to start to change the way that restaurants do delivery. If logistics companies come into play and it becomes a software as a service, that's going to be a big shift in the delivery model for food. This next one is obvious, contactless payment. That's going to be a standard. Just expect that contactless is going to be there, and understand it's not moving. Here's one that's kind of unique and different, and we're starting to see a few brands that are actually implementing this, and that is kind of these omni-channel concepts. And what I mean by that is you're utilizing, instead of used to be takeout and delivery and dine-in, that was your primary. People are now looking at direct-to-consumer, virtual brand models, creating lifestyle food products, second and third tier market entries, doing premium product offerings. this is going to create a whole new variety of products that can come out of your restaurant, and in some cases maybe even move to something like a packaged good. If you think about someone like a Kava who built a business on packaged goods that basically spawned out of a fast casual concept, which originally spawned out of a full service restaurant and a chef driven restaurant. So you can kind of see that movement really moving into this next level. The other thing I think that's really going to play into the next 5 years is we are really going to see autonomous delivery appear. What's happening at Tesla and the kind of moves that they are making in self-driving and automation, that I think is going to start to make its way into the driver market and eventually into a market where you may be buying a self-driving vehicle or device to deliver your food. And that's also going to happen, I think, with Amazon moving very quickly and very advanced in terms of drone delivery, especially with 5G rolling in. Lots of factors here for 2021. And of course, if you guys, that kind of wraps up the presentation for today, but if you want to hear more of this kind of content, because I break down this kind of topic on an all the time basis, ongoing across these 3 different podcasts. The Barron Report, I do focus a lot on the restaurant industry, but it's more from more of a business aspect. Obviously, Fast Casual Nation, the #1 fast casual podcast in the world, in the universe. You want to make sure and tune into that one. And my new show called Override, which is really going into more of societal shifts that have a big effect on how consumers respond to businesses. Obviously, the restaurant industry is included in that. So, of course, I want to invite you guys back to coming to our next sessions of Recover America. Robert Irvine is going to continue to keynote our sessions. He'll be back on in December 15th. So hopefully you loved his session there. And again, make sure and hit the chat if you want to get some questions answered. I'm happy to jump in there and do what I can to try to answer your questions and help you guys out. If you have a great idea for maybe a session here on Recover America, shoot us an email to producer@foodabletv.com. Thanks for watching on this session. We'll catch you in the next one. Stay tuned.